But we are delighted to have Tom HUBINA, VP of Community, if I recall correctly, from Z2 Live, talking about their journey into social mobile and some of the really interesting things that have hit along the way.
Great. Thanks much. Thanks, Dave. So Z2 Live, as you can see, it's been up there for a while. I guess you probably have read it all by now. We have 2 games that come up in market. Our most recent one is Maelstrom, but today we're going to be talking about Trade Nations, which is our more casual themed type of a game. And overall, what's kind of the metaphor that I've been working with so far with social and mobile has been, it's kind of like off-road racing to me. It's like really fast, lots of chaos, lots of bumps, lots of dust, and messy, messy, messy. But at the end of the day, it's really rewarding too. So just in general, social game development is very different from traditional game development. You have loosely specified milestone scopes. So you start trying to build your product, and you really don't know what it's going to be, or as you just try to move from your alpha to beta to whatever. Very, very different. Things constantly changing on you. You're trying to evolve the product. And at the end of the day, there's no such thing as a final product. So what you end up shipping is, you have almost no idea, or there's no resemblance to what you originally designed when you started off. And one of the really key things that really caused us some issues is that you must develop your product for long-term maintenance. Anytime a lot of cases when you're trying to get a product out the door, you take shortcuts. You say, oh, we're getting close to shipping. We got to cut corners and do whatever you got to do. But that ends up creating some technical debt. And in a normal product, that doesn't really matter so much. But when you actually have to maintain a product for years, that technical debt becomes expensive. Your content pipeline, we cut corners here and there, but you have to make it really, really fast, and so you can get content out the door as quickly as possible. You really have to, speed and velocity is just so key to everything. So for Trade Nations, it was a collaboration with a developer up in Canada called Byte Games. We had some very core design goals in mind when we first started off the product. It had to have mass market appeal. We had to have an inherently social game mechanic, which is where the idea of trading with your friends comes in. We were designing for mobile space. We figured short, frequent sessions were really important, and we wanted to be very player-friendly. We decided to do away with the wilt mechanic that was very popular at the time with games like Farmville. So we started off development in, gosh, I guess it would be around March of last year, and it was a bit of a bumpy start. It took a bit longer than we expected to get the things done. We had, our server technology took a little bit longer. The client took a little bit longer. More iteration time was spent. But eventually we finally got out the door, and it launched, and we got you had an Apple feature right out of the gate, which no matter how well you plan, no matter what, if you have a large server component, it just seems like invariably you're going to run into scalability problems, which we did. But fortunately, we were able to adapt and adapt them pretty quickly, and we were able to get things nice and stable after probably about a couple weeks. The next thing that came up into us were our players used that time to often find all kinds of wonderful cheats and exploits. They started hacking the client. They started, finding different holes in our game mechanics to exploit and get to the end of the games really fast, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And one of the other things that was kind of unexpected as we really started getting into our metrics was we hadn't fully appreciated just how much of an impact the launch time, or the amount of time that it takes from the time you actually tap on the app to actually open it to the point where you're actually able to engage. It had a huge impact, and we saw very large drop-offs on our user base. And as we kind of started trying to delve into where all of our players were going, we figured out, oh my gosh, as we started adding more content over the air and things of that nature, our launch times kept getting longer and longer, and our drop-off rates become high. So that was one of the other big things that was a big problem for us that we had to address as quickly as possible. Which, brings it to the next point. The day after you ship one of these products, it becomes the busiest day of ever. We actually doubled our team in the weeks following our initial launch, and we're absolutely, if you thought crunch time before you shipped a product was big, once you start getting real data, real numbers, and everything into it, you start going absolutely crazy. It's because you realize that every single user that comes in, if they're not seeing what they want, if they're not getting what they can be, that is just a lost opportunity. And so you start being very, very, shall we say, energetic about trying to get as many people in as many hours as you can to fix all the bugs and the hacks and the exploits, to get new content, to figure out new places within the game where you can get attach additional hooks for metrics, coming up with different monetization mechanisms, adding advertising to the game, which it did not originally have. coming up with new viral mechanics, ways of people to invite friends. All these type of things all end up coming up to things you have to adapt with right away. Everything is like we have to have it, we have to have everything done yesterday. And it was really, we planned for it, we knew it was coming, but we had no real appreciation for it until you actually got into it, just how crazy that pressure was, and still is, actually. But on the brighter side, once you get past all of that, then you actually get to step back and take a look and see how the players are actually playing the game. And that's always the most rewarding thing, is the fans really start getting into it, and they start playing the games in ways that we had no expectation that this is what they were going to be doing. For example, the wheat exploit. We had a hole in our game mechanic where basically we had originally set the game up with a dynamic marketplace. So as more people bought and sold the resources, the prices would change accordingly. Well, when you combine that with the fact that we had the ability to make unlimited buildings, what ended up happening was the prices for wheat ended up actually dropping to the point where basically they were almost free, and people bought millions of bakeries, and now, between combining those two things, they could actually complete the entire game in about a day. That was not so good. But so we actually had to go after that one really fast. And of course, what we did was we said, okay, let's get rid of this dynamic marketplace. It really wasn't working the way we wanted to anyways. We replaced it with a marketplace that was random. Every day, the prices would just change randomly, which there were entire websites dedicated to try to figure out how our market worked, trying to predict what was going to be the next day. And it was a remarkably simple little random thing, and they just had a lot of fun trying to figure it out, which brought to the market metagame. Eventually, they kind of figured out that, oh yes, the prices are going to change and adapt, and so they started actually moved away from, or in addition to the city building, they actually started hoarding resources and planning for the market shifts so they could actually buy and sell resources, buy low, sell high, and we essentially added a dope wars mechanic to our game, which was surprising how quickly and how vigorously they went after that. One of the other unexpected pieces that we got out of this was players there's a lot of different ways of where you can trade with other players, or that's to say the levels that you can trade with are, how much time is this going to take, 6 hours, 12 hours, whatever. And different players had different preferences. And we didn't really have a mechanism inside the game for them to communicate to the other players, hey, this is the type of trades that I want to engage in. So they found, as in all situations, they find a way. We had the ability to use your Facebook picture as your icon. And what these hardcore players did is they actually went out and created a bunch of Facebook accounts that had, where the icon for the Facebook account was essentially 6 hours or less, 4 hours or less, at least at least 8 hours. And they made a bunch of different things, and so they changed their Facebook icons to indicate how they actually wanted to trade and what kind of trades they would accept. And they got really vigorous about if anybody tried to trade with them that wasn't the right way, they'd immediately unfriend them, and it was extremely brutal. It was surprising just how in depth these guys got into what they really wanted to trade with other people. But those are the things we didn't expect. Then as we start getting into the things you have to always try to do, which is try to look at the metrics or try to figure out what it is that we can actually do to optimize our game, which is primarily comes down to identifying the user pain points. For us, we came up with about 4 different pain points. We had the users want to see everything. They're completionists. They need to get every last little piece down and done. And then you have the folks who want to have a compete for status motivation, where they it's always keeping up with the Joneses, trying to make sure that they always have the coolest stuff compared to their friends. And then you have the hoarders, where they just want to amass wealth and resources to try to get the most money they can. They have that whole motivation. And then last but not least, the guys who want to maximize their experience and get the highest levels possible. And these guys would actually complain when they hit the level cap that, hey, the level cap, I've hit it. Now can we, any more levels? What's going on? So that was a constant thing. And so we tried to figure out, okay, how do we actually introduce new content or new game mechanics that will speak to those to those type of players? So we started, coming up with some other ideas. We started off, our simplest ones were vanity decorations. Just these were very expensive decorations that really didn't have any impact other than just they sat there and maybe they did something neat. They had we had a trampoline, had a little villager that would just jump, and it was kind of neat. That was pretty effective. It was really nice. But then we started, but that gets 2 out of the 4. Then we added increased storage, basically just getting bigger warehouses, more ways for them to store their resources, which kind of hits into the hoarding mechanic, and that was also really successful. But it only hit one of our key metrics, but it hit it so well that it actually ended up monetizing very well. Then we said, okay, well, what else can we do? Well, let's try to combine even more pieces. We added decorations that, if for each decoration, or these decorations you added them, they would add a bonus to your experience and the other output that you got from all the shop jobs. And so once players were able to figure out, oh wow, I can actually double my experience, triple my experience, they started getting really aggressive over buying the stuff. And so that, as we get more and more of these check boxes in these various boxes, the results to monetization were that much more advanced. Adopting a villager, similar type of a thing. You had a cap. Villagers are required in order to do operations within the land, and so we added the ability to adopt a villager, which basically made it unbounded. You could spend as much money as you wanted to spend to get as many villagers as you wanted, and once again, that was one of the more substantial changes. And last but not least, we came up with specialty buildings. Now these were there's a variety of different ones. We had between the circus or the mayor's village and other types of things. These were all designed to basically be extremely expensive, rare. But they had huge benefits and to all the different categories, and those were obviously the ones that actually ended up monetizing the best. So kind of once we started getting all the engine together for the monetization and getting the itemization done properly, we move on into the next one, which is actually kind of one of the more challenging things in the iOS, is trying to get increase our virality. And you can say that virality is hard, but it's not so much that it's hard. It's just really hard to track, because you don't really have the information. You don't have any kind of tracking codes that you can push through the App Store. So if you often do email or web promotions or whatever else, trying to leverage Facebook and other types of things. There's no clean mechanism for actually trying to track all this stuff. You can get some pieces, you can get others, but at the end of the day, you'll never know if someone makes a wall post off onto Facebook and someone clicks on it, goes off, downloads the app, and comes into your thing, unless you're just not going to know that that person came from that location. So it's really hard to measure what the benefits are. So instead, we've decided we were going to focus on the things we could track and the things that we knew would make a lot of money, which was we were going to go off and we were going to buy a bunch of cheap installs, and we were going to focus on increasing lifetime value through all of the mechanisms I talked about before. It was great. There was actually the customer acquisition costs on iOS were quite substantially lower than they are on Facebook, for example. So it was very much a field day for a while. But unfortunately now, as I'm sure most of you know, the ability to do incentivized installs, offer walls, even cross promotions between games, Apple has said, no, this is no longer an acceptable thing because it messes with the ranking systems. So now the acquisition costs are much higher, which is going to push us even more and more into forcing virality or doing things that are coming up with new mechanics where, for example, in Empires and Allies or Cityville, where you have content that is locked based on the number of friends that you've brought into the game. And I think, it always felt to me like that's one of the things that I don't think users really appreciate too much, because you're basically beating them over the head with, hey, you better bring your friends in here. But given that this is where things are moving, I suspect we're going to see a lot more of that on this platform. But all of these things kind of bring you down to what is the finish line of what are we trying to achieve here, and of course it's all about the money. One of the things that we figured out very, very quickly is you've got to have multiple revenue streams. Our first launch basically only had in-app purchase. We quickly added offer walls with incentivized installs, and of course that was a substantial jump in revenue. And we also added advertising between banner ads. We've been looking at video, and a bunch of other pieces, everything we can possibly do, especially when you have to deal with the fact that some of the stuff, the policies may change. So having different revenue models or different ways of having users bring you money is always it's a good safety net. And of course, the big thing, of course, is always finding ways to more and more ways for the players to spend currency. there's a lot of there's many schools of thought on how do you get your get players to spend money, but it really comes down to three main things as far as I'm concerned. You must design for monetization from the start. It's not something you're going to cobble onto and add later. Plan for it, and work on it. And literally, don't be afraid to try things. Find and come up with a new mechanic, drop it in. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. There were some of the stuff that we didn't expect to have any type of impact at all ended up being our biggest revenue generators. We never thought, for example, that the trampoline would be anywhere near. It's like, why would it? It doesn't really affect the game. Because we're gamers, we're designers. We know we min-max. We get everything we want to get the most benefit we can. All this thing is just some little visual guy hopping on a trampoline. We had no idea how big it was going to be, and it was probably one of the best things we did early on. And then finally, I can't drill this enough. Identify the user pain points. Find what it is that is actually what the users are motivating them to do what they want to do. It's not really so much about pain as it is just where are they hitting their little roadblocks, and how do you actually allow them to give you money to get past those roadblocks or to get their next piece as quickly as they can. That's the primary, pretty much everything that we went through with the current stuff, which brings me to what's coming next. What's our next things that we're looking to get into, and it's really trying to take what we're doing on iOS and mostly iOS, mostly in the US, and how do we make it big everywhere. Android is a very interesting platform, and it's one that's getting a lot of attention, of course. It's huge market share. Everyone keeps talking about market share. As of yet, I don't really know anybody who's making anywhere near the kind of money on Android that they're making on iOS. It's just not there yet. There's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of potential, and it's someday, very, very soon, I think it's going to explode, but it's not quite there just yet. And it's a challenge because building games over cross-platform. I come from I've been doing mobile since 2003. I've dealt with the device fragmentation, the pain, and the suffering of all that comes with it. So I know that we're trying to build cross-platform games across multiple languages, across the hundreds of devices you have to deal with. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, but probably the biggest challenge that I see with it is that it adds friction. It makes it so everything takes more time. Even your initial development, if you're trying to build for multiple platforms, ends up taking longer than if you just develop for the one platform. And in this space, as I've mentioned before, velocity is king. Speed. So it's very got to find that right balance. So that's I'm very curious how it's going to roll out over the next year or so. And of course, international. I mean, we've heard them earlier talking about how big China is, as well as and how seriously they're taking these different markets. So that's also going to be a big growth opportunity for a lot of the companies that originated here in the States. That's pretty much everything in a nutshell. Like I said, I was anticipating having a slightly shorter amount of time to work with, but that's pretty much all of it. Does anybody have any questions?
You launched in Canada first, correct?
Yes.
And how did that work out for you? Would you do that again? Do you recommend that?
I definitely recommend it. For us, it was a lot about trying to get making sure the servers are scalable and everything else. And we identified some issues while we were in Canada. Of course, it just isn't anywhere near the same magnitude of what you'll get when you actually bring it out internationally. So, but yeah, it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. Oh, we have no one over here.
You talked a lot about the issues, but your game was obviously tremendously successful. What do you think were maybe the three top factors for what made people get so intensely excited about it and involved in it?
Well, a lot of it came down to just really executing on our initial plans. There was the idea of basically making it so it's very, very mass market, very easy for everyone to play. We tried to keep it as accessible as possible. And balancing that with, again, it's designed for mobile, keeping it very short play durations, designing for, yes, you play for a few minutes, take care of your business, and move on to the next piece. the re-engagement through push notification is actually really critical for those type of play styles. If you're going to keep very short play times, you're not going to have the long engagement or sessions that you'll see with Facebook, for example. Because with Facebook, someone's going to come and they're going to sit down and they're going to play a game for, anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour or whatever as much time as they could possibly. They're kind of planned, they're engrossed. Whereas you'll see on mobile platforms, there's a much more. I'm here now. I got my notification. These things these things are now ready. My cookies are done cooking in the bake shop. Okay, collect. Good. Do my little update. Okay, I'm done. Move on to my next piece. So designing for that actually I think is one of the big things that help us keep our players engaged.
Hey, what effect do you think making an app that's bigger than 20 megabytes versus smaller than 20 megabytes has on downloads?
Honestly, it's been kind of interesting. It depends on the app. For our Trade Nations game, we were very focused on keeping it under 20 megs, and to this day, it still is under 20 megs. But our Metalstorm game is actually well over the 20 meg limit, and it's been downloaded like crazy. So I don't know how bad it really is, honestly. It doesn't really seem to have any kind of negative impact on Metalstorm. So.
When did you think of pivoting into your second game rather than doing like your first game updates? And by identifying your pain points, how much times your average revenue per user increased?
Well, definitely every single time we've done an update, our average revenue has taken a substantial uptick, and there's no doubt about that. As far as the pivoting from one game to the other, it wasn't so much a pivot. We actually had both games in development at the same time. They were a little bit staggered, and the idea was we're going after different genres, trying to have a more broader depth of portfolio than just, hey, we're only going to make this one style of game over and over and over again. So and we're still continuing that to this day. We still have multiple titles in development for different types of genres. So we'll be focusing on that long term. Yeah.
So I'm just curious. Obviously, Trade Nations is broad, mass, appeals to a very casual audience, very friendly theme. Mm-hmm. Metalstorm, slightly different.
Just slightly.
How has kind of managing and interacting with those communities been similar and different for you guys? And what have been the biggest differences in managing Metalstorm?
The biggest difference in managing Metalstorm. Well, interestingly enough, it's a very different monetization pattern. So we definitely went into it with the expectation this is more of an action-oriented game. So you're not going to sit there and have somebody playing. And it's just a very different game. I'm trying to think of a good way of expressing this. Managing the communities has not been. I thought for sure that we would have a much bigger issue with Metalstorm, with the younger audience, the more hardcore audience would be much more aggressive about we hate this, we hate that, we hate this, that. Honestly, they've both been just about the same. They're both the loudest complainers are always the show up on your communities and all that type of stuff. So that type of management's been pretty much on par. Monetizations, like I said, you have a different focus. One of them is much more item-centric. The other one is much more, it's almost more like an energy mechanic where it's much, you're buying weapons and stuff that you're going to consume right away. So.
Can you compare the effort on the back-end server side and server stuff you did for launch compared to how much gameplay it was? Was it more server-side stuff and building that whole infrastructure up, or was it more gameplay? And my second question is, can you share that deck with us?
Can I share that what?
Share the deck with us.
Oh, the deck. Yeah, I believe the deck will be on the website. Yeah. We were originally a server and platform company, so it's kind of hard to differentiate the two a bit. We spent a lot of time and energy building out the large, the platform that we're planning on building many games over. So the server platform was actually a lot more work than the game itself, but that's just by nature of the fact that we were trying to build out the platform the first time. For our second game, it's actually much more, or not second game, for the game that's currently in development, it's much more heavily based, or driven by the client, because we've already done a lot of the work and now sharing it on the server side. Okay. All right, I guess that's everything.